Well, growing allegations of voter suppression are emerging in the hard-fought race for governor in Georgia.
We separate because the law tells us to, and that is in the interest of the child.
I want to live to see the day that we send Roe versus Wade to the ash heap of history, where it belongs.
Look at what's marching up. That's an invasion. That's an invasion.
Hi, my name is Stephen. I'm from Concord.
Well, I'm Kate Thompson. I grew up in New Hampshire.
Hi, Senator. My name's Plata. I'm an ACLU voter.
My name is Daniel Ponto, and the issue I really care about is immigrant rights.
And one issue I really care about is women's reproductive rights.
An issue that's really important to me in this upcoming election is voting rights.
One of the issues that pertains to me the most is criminal justice reform.
If you were given the opportunity to be president, can you illustrate what you would do in kind of eliminating inequities at the federal level?
I have a lot of friends who are undocumented, and I want to know what you're going to do to protect them and the 11 million undocumented people who are currently in the U.S.
I want to know what we can do about mass incarceration as far as sentencing reform and criminal justice reform.
Will you urge Congress to pass legislation to be able to hold corporations accountable for stealing data in a way that they're not right now?
As president, would you make sure that every woman in this country has the right to choose for their own body?
I was wondering what you plan on doing for marijuana legalization, specifically as it relates to criminal justice reform.
I'm Kate Thompson. I grew up in New Hampshire, and I'm an ACLU voter, which means that I vote for civil rights and civil liberties.
My name is Stephen. I'm from Concord, and I'm an ACLU voter because civil liberties are important to me in this upcoming election. I'm an ACLU voter because civil liberties are important to me.
And I am an ACLU voter, and I care about civil rights and civil liberties.
Welcome to the ACLU Rights for All campaign kickoff event. I'd like to start by thanking the good people of Durham, New Hampshire for having us here today, for helping us host this event. I'd also like to thank the many, many people who are watching this event via live stream at home with friends, with family members. My name is Ronald Newman, and on behalf of the American Civil Liberties Union, I am tremendously grateful that you have joined us for this kickoff. Today, we will talk about a journey that we will take together between now and November 2020. Today, we will formally launch the Rights for All campaign. In this campaign, we're going to turn up the volume on civil rights and civil liberties for each and every one of the presidential candidates. And we're going to do that in some specific ways. In the first stage of this campaign, we're going to show up at town halls, we're going to show up at meet and greets, we're going to show up at candidate events, and we're going to ask questions. We're going to ask them where they stand on criminal justice reform, where they stand on reproductive freedom. We're going to get those answers on video, so there will be a record of exactly what their position is. As we move to later in the campaign, we will take all of that information and we will share it out to other voters in places like New Hampshire, but also voters all across the country, because on Election Day, we don't want just me to be informed. We don't want just the people in this room to be informed. We want every single American voter to know where the candidates stand on the issues we care about the most. And then still later in the campaign, we will get together, we'll work together, and we will drive voter turnout in the primaries, in the caucuses, and eventually in November 2020 to levels we have never seen before, because this election is important, and we're going to play that role too. So that's the plan. That's the game plan. The key actor in this plan is you. Me and Team ACLU, we are the sidekick. We are the Robin to your Batman. If we do our job well, we may get a nomination or two for Best Supporting Actor, but this campaign will rise, this campaign will succeed Because of you. Because you decide to show up at a candidate town hall. Because you make your presence felt at a candidate meet and greet. Because you stand up and you raise your hand. And you say, I got a question. Because you take a friend with you to that event. And when the candidate answers your question, you record exactly what he says, exactly what she says. Because you send us that video so we have a good, comprehensive, complete record of what the candidates have said about LGBT rights, about privacy, about voting rights. Because you make clear that civil rights and civil liberties will be top of mind when you walk into the ballot box, when you walk into the ballot booth on Election Day. That's how this campaign works. That's how we get a president that protects and advances rights for all. So, what we're going to talk about over the next few minutes is we're going to talk about some good old-fashioned activism, some good old-fashioned people power. Like that's what we're trying to channel here. When we talk about these early months in this campaign, we are going to these events because we want to give a visual expression of people power. We want to stand up and we want to ask hard questions. And we don't want to let them weasel out of answering. We don't want to let them give us something vague and amorphous. We want a concrete answer to where they stand on the issues that we care about. That's how we ensure we get the president that we genuinely want. So for that part of the process, asking candidates questions, the greatest number of opportunities in these early days will be in the first 4 states: New Hampshire, Nevada, Iowa, South Carolina. That said, my hometown is Memphis, Tennessee, and my parents let me know a couple of weeks ago that one of our many candidates came through Memphis a couple of weeks ago, and they got a chance to go see that candidate and engage. So irrespective of where you are, there's a chance for you to get in this battle with us, and we really need you to do so. And if you just so happen to live in a city or a town where there is not a near-term visit scheduled for a candidate, you're still part of the team, because you can ask that same key question on social media. And remember, everything's a strength in numbers issue. If we ask that question enough times on social media, we'll get our answer. We'll figure out where they stand. So as for me and the ACLU team, our role in this process is to help and support your activism. So if you're watching the live stream today and you're thinking, I don't know if I have a particular question I want to ask a candidate, no problem, we can help with that. We spend all day, every day thinking about the key issues that affect millions and millions of Americans. And many of those issues affect you and affect your families. And we'll work with you. We'll workshop some ideas and make sure that when you stand up at that candidate event, you have a question that feels true to you and a question that matters. As I hinted above, when we get that information collected, there's going to be a big stage 2 to this campaign, where each and every one of us will get an opportunity to call another voter and share some of that information back out, to text another voter, to share a candidate comparison tool online so everybody, again, knows where the candidates stand. That's the roadmap. If we do this together, if we do this in big numbers, we can win. And the definition of winning is getting a president in the White House that will protect and advance rights for all. So let's put a finer point on what we're talking about here. Let's take it a level deeper and get into a little more detail. We're going to spend some time talking about a key set of issues. We're going to talk about criminal justice reform. We're going to talk about voting rights. We're also going to discuss the issue of protecting the rights of immigrants. And we're going to have a conversation about reproductive freedom. But as we move into this next part of the program, I'm going to get a little help. So I'm going to have a few of my colleagues from the ACLU, and importantly, a few individuals that have felt directly the impact of bad policies in these areas in their individual lives. So with that, I'd ask my team to come to the stage. think we'll start the conversation with Kadeen.
Thank you so much, and thanks for everyone for being here today. My name is Kadeen Bennett. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Intergovernmental Affairs with the ACLU of Illinois, and I'm joined by Jamie from West Virginia. Would you like to get started?
Yes. I am here today to tell my story, which unfortunately isn't an uncommon one. I was pushed into a room at a party by a boy. I barely knew him. He forced himself on me. I was scared. I didn't fight. And as a result of that night, I became pregnant. I remember it like it was yesterday, buying a pregnancy test and hiding in a bathroom stall at the local mall, crying. A woman whose face I never saw spoke to me from behind the door. She said I would be okay, I wasn't alone, and she gave me the number to the Women's Health Center. I will forever be grateful to her. I was 16. I called and scheduled an abortion. I was terrified. I scrambled to pull funds together, but I never once regretted that choice. I live in one of the poorest states in the country, and yet also one that just voted to take away Medicaid-funded abortion access. Forcing any woman to give birth to a child because of her socioeconomic situation is barbaric and unjust. That is why we were calling on the next president to ensure that anyone, regardless of where they live or how much money they make, can access abortion and other reproductive health care. I now volunteer at the same women's health center that helped me. I carry an umbrella to help protect women from people who try to shame them. I also work with the ACLU to oppose Justice Kavanaugh's nomination and against Amendment 1, our Medicaid ban. So again, my story isn't uncommon, but I now control my own narrative. In a state where 29% of my population is on Medicaid, abortion service is imperative. I have been fighting for this, and I believe we deserve a president who will do the same. Thank you.
So Jamie's experience emphasizes that a right to have an abortion does not mean that it's easily accessible. And with this administration, we're living in a time where we cannot take our rights for granted. We're seeing attempts to restrict access in states throughout the country. There are bills that are being introduced, there are laws that are passed, clinics are closing, and patients are losing options. And there are barriers that are increasing for poor and working class women in cities and rural areas, regardless of their political or religious affiliations. But there are also states that are successfully working to remove barriers to access. States like my home state of Illinois, hope some of you are watching right now, they're in part because of people like Jamie who bravely tell their stories about choosing between whether or not they will have an abortion or pay for rent, and also people who are taking action to hold legislators accountable. Because of that, we were able to do what no other state has done via legislation in decades. We ended our state's ban on abortion coverage under our medical insurance program. But we couldn't stop there, especially when we kept hearing stories of women who found out, sometimes after paying high premiums each month, that their private insurance did not cover abortion care. So this year, we've introduced the Reproductive Health Act, which requires all private insurance plans to cover abortion care, just like they do for other pregnancy-related care. The RHA also updates our state laws to ensure that abortion care is treated like health care and not a crime. People with private insurance, especially those who barely made that Medicaid qualifying cutoff, they need the peace of mind of knowing that their insurance meets all of their reproductive health care needs. So we will keep fighting in Illinois, but the truth is, full reproductive health care, including abortion care, should not depend on where someone lives. We need a president who will ensure that anyone, regardless of where they live, how much they make, how they get their insurance, can access contraception, quality maternity care, and safe legal abortion. What that means is lifting the Hyde Amendment and other government bans on insurance coverage of abortion. A key way to get this done is through grassroots action. That means people power, and for the people watching, that means you. Whatever state you're watching from, there is some action you can take to support reproductive freedom. You can ask questions and get commitments from local elected officials or presidential candidates. You can support affirmative legislation, and you can work against bills that restrict access. We really need you to take action. Thank you.
I'm Julie Ebenstein. I'm an attorney with the Voting Rights Project. The ACLU stands with activists working to end unjust felony disenfranchisement laws that strip people of their fundamental right to vote. We need to ensure that all citizens of age have a voice in our democracy, and that includes people who are currently incarcerated. Last November, the ACLU was part of a movement to restore voting rights to 1.4 million people disenfranchised in Florida, a movement that was led by people directly affected by these unjust laws. That success was the largest expansion of the electorate since the 26th Amendment lowered the voting age to 18. And we will defend... And we will defend that victory against self-interested politicians who now want to require people to pay fines and fees before they can have their rights restored. Requiring payment to vote would create two classes of returning citizens, a group wealthy enough to get their voting rights back and another too poor to vote. That is, on its face, a grave injustice, unconstitutional and un-American. We need to protect voting rights because when it comes to elections, there are no do-overs. That's why we're challenging voter suppression right here in New Hampshire, where they passed a law to prevent students from registering and voting in-state. We're fighting voter suppression in Georgia, where we saw flagrant attempts to remove voters from the registration rolls just before the last election. We just finished a trial in Ohio to fix unfair gerrymandering in congressional districts. And we will be at the Supreme Court next month to make sure that this administration counts people in all communities in the next census. ACLU voters want a more inclusive electorate, full democratic participation. We want fewer registration barriers, modernized election systems, and laws that ensure all votes count equally. We want our fellow citizens' voting rights restored and their path to participation unimpeded. Now is the time to make presidential candidates commit to ACLU principles and protect voting rights for all. Thank you.
My name is Rasan Hall. I'm the director of the Racial Justice Program for the ACLU of Massachusetts. We desire to live in a world that does not rely on the criminal legal system or incarceration to deal with the ills of society, or that makes worse this nation's original sins of genocide and slavery by pursuing racially disparate enforcement and prosecution of criminal laws. For too long, we have failed to honor this nation's promises of freedom and liberty when we incarcerate nearly 2.3 million people and have saddled some 70 million with a criminal record that impacts their ability to successfully navigate society. The ACLU is committed to ending mass incarceration by reducing this nation's prison and jail population by at least 50% and challenging racism throughout the criminal legal system by advocating for bills that disrupt racialized targeting and policing practices, or eliminate or seriously reform cash bail practices, or repeal mandatory minimum sentences, or restore the right to vote for formerly incarcerated people, just to name a few. We've launched efforts in community to organize around criminal law reform in all 50 states, including right here in New Hampshire. Nationally, our volunteers have advocated around 122 criminal law reform bills that have become state law. Our volunteers have knocked on 389,000 doors and met with nearly 2,000 state legislators. We've organized 29 candidate debates, and we've made sure that even when the elections are over, we hold those prosecutors and other elected officials accountable to criminal law reform. You can be a part of that work by being a part of this Rights for All campaign. And now we look to the next president of these United States to commit to addressing mass incarceration, which has hurt millions of people, particularly black people, by making a commitment to a national or nationwide campaign of cutting this nation's prison and jail population in half, even at the state and local level, and committing to a 50% reduction of the federal prison population during their presidency. This matters. This matters because ACLU voters recognize and understand that criminal justice reform ensures rights for all. And to tell us more about how we do that and why it matters is my friend Rick Speck.
What up, though? My name's Rick Speck, and if you ain't from Detroit, what up, though, anyway? I'm one of 4 smart justice organizers in Michigan, and part of the work I do is training and recruiting formerly incarcerated men, women, and youth to be the future leaders in this work. These groups are often overlooked and undervalued. That is no more. Today, their voices count because all voices count. I was also previously incarcerated and served multiple sentences totaling over 18 years of incarceration. The Smart Justice campaign has allowed me to share what's broken in the criminal justice system from my experiences. The campaign has been inclusive and bringing together folks that may not have otherwise shared a space to create and to learn from one another and to transform the criminal legal system in a way that represents all people, regardless of race, creed, or color. And we've been very intentional about lifting and supporting the voices that have been in the belly of the beast. And what I mean by that is folks with personal lived experiences are at the center of this campaign. And this has already brought us wins in the form of legislation that was passed by formerly incarcerated men and women in New Mexico, Kentucky, and Delaware. Today, we are calling on the presidential candidates to share their bold vision to put justice in the justice system. And this is just the beginning. We're going to create wins and disruption in a system that is not designed with justice in mind. We know we can't do it alone. So I'm going to ask everyone out there, I'm going to ask everyone in this room to please join the Rights for All campaign today. Thank you.
You know, just sitting here listening to the stories and the wins that we've been able to achieve as ACLU and what we're demanding of the next presidential candidate, I'm just so moved and honored to be in this fight with you all and realizing that the fight for rights for all is really intertwined amongst all of our issues, and I'm going to really look forward to the day when we all win justice on all of our issues. Good evening, my name is Silvia Ruiz. Soy inmigrante de Guatemala. And for immigrants, it's been a really hard couple of years under this administration. Cada día vemos nuevos ataques contra los inmigrantes de esta administración. Kids torn away from their families, put in cages. Large immigration raids in our communities that spread fear and deport people who have built their lives here. People living along the border, in border communities, living under militarized conditions with immigration agents everywhere they turn. And immigrants coming here seeking a better life, dying in custody. Immigrants like Jacqueline, Gael, Makin, like Felipe, Gomez, Alonso, and so many others whose names we may never know. But we should know that these atrocities, these tragedies, are possible because for the past 30 years, since the 1980s, every administration has built up a framework and laws and policies that make the tragedies possible. Our current administration didn't solely create the problem. They've just amplified the cruelty. And it's on us, as ACLU, as voters, to overhaul a system that today criminalizes, detains, and deports our families, our friends, and our neighbors. To imagine a system where immigrants are treated with dignity and humanity. Ya es tiempo de un sistema en cual todos inmigrantes sean tratados con dignidad y humanidad. And that's why we're demanding that the next presidential candidates commit to overhaul our immigration system, creating new paths to citizenship, to dismantle our inhumane and unfair immigration and border enforcement system. The regime right now that is being deployed to terrorize our communities. And really, we're talking about major systems change here. We need presidential candidates to rethink our immigration system, to end the use and practice of detainers, to get state and local police out of the federal government's job of federal immigration enforcement. And we need to cut down our detention levels by at least 75%. Today, daily, 50,000 immigrants are detained. In 1994, that number was just 7,000. It's possible if we have the will to change it. This immigration detention system operates in the shadows, in violation of immigrants' basic due process, and our next president needs to dismantle this overblown enforcement regime. And so I'm gonna turn it over to my friend, Jose Ivan, un líder en la comunidad de Minnesota, to explain why this demand is so important and what it would mean to have real justice for immigrants in America. Jose Ivan.
Hello everyone, my name is Jose Ivan Parga, saludos a mi comunidad. I'm the proud son of a multi-status Mexican immigrant family. I work for local organizations in Worthington, Minnesota, including Seeds of Justice and Be the Change Leadership on Purpose. I work in coalition with the ACLU. My family came to the US over 25 years ago, escaping violence and poverty, choosing to bet on the opportunities here for themselves and for their kids. Anybody in their position would have done the same. I'm glad they did. They gave me and my cousins opportunities, education, and safety. However, while I have the privilege of citizenship, most of my family is still undocumented. I'm here today to speak on their behalf. I wish I could tell you their names. I wish I could tell you how amazing they are. I can't. Some of us work, some of us go to church, some have carne asadas. We're builders, entrepreneurs, factory workers, writers, nurses, activists, and so much more. They have no clear path to citizenship. There is no line to wait in. They continue to suffer as voiceless shadows of their community. Most can't drive safely since they don't have driver's licenses and are very hopeful of the Freedom to Drive Act in Minnesota. This bill would allow people who are undocumented to qualify for driver's licenses. People shouldn't be afraid to go to the doctor's or to the grocery store or driving their kids to their activities. They suffer as local law enforcement oversteps their authority against them. One family member was kept for an extra 2 months after being detained and posting bail for an unrelated offense. Local law enforcement doesn't have that authority. Local police should be building trust in the community so that we can work cooperatively to keep our community safe and not have to worry that we or that people in our communities will be deported. We're so afraid of one day one of us being deported to Mexico and being ripped away from each other with nothing to show for 25 years of hard work. Some have been deported, having to relive the trauma of coming here undocumented once more to reunite with their family. I remember the fear after the immigration raid of our local pork plant in 2006. Hundreds of people were detained, 1,200 in all across 6 plants in different states, and Worthington suddenly felt like a ghost town. My family didn't want to leave their homes, and they were in fear of any car that passed by. I was only 9, so I didn't understand much, but I knew that my family was suffering in painful silence. We can't let people live in fear for looking for a better life. Our next president has to stand up for immigrants and against the abuse of our flawed immigration laws. The immigrant community deserves and demands to step out of the shadows and live without fear.
Thank you, Jose Yvonne, and thanks to all of you for making all of these issues a bit more real for the audience that has joined us tonight. So I suspect after hearing that, there are a few of you sitting at home watching the live stream saying, hey, Ronnie, hey, Sylvia, Rasan, Kadeen, I agree. These issues are really, really important. But I'm not sure I can do this. I've never asked a presidential candidate a question before. But we pulled this event together and we launched this campaign because we were really sure that you could do this. We felt really strongly that this was definitely doable. And so we're going to keep circling back to how you make that happen, the various ways you can take action today. It starts with learning a little bit about the policies that are affecting millions of our fellow Americans, some of the issues we just talked about. You can also take the step that we talked about before of asking a candidate a question, whether that be in person or over social media. There are also roles for you to play in contacting other voters and explaining to them why this campaign and this election cycle are so important. So learning the issues, asking a question, getting them on the record, engaging other voters, all of those are ways you can get engaged today. If you want to get started, and if you haven't done this already, you can go to rightsforall.us and take the pledge. That pledge is a pledge to vote for a president that will protect civil liberties and civil rights for all. And if you sign that pledge, that gives us an opportunity to follow up with you and provide any support, help, assistance you might need. What we want to do next is watch another video, and you'll see in this video a few people just like you, because my sense is that the very best evidence that you can do this is the fact that there are people just like you doing it already.
I'm excited to be here. This is my first ACLU event like this. I have no idea what to expect.
I
think it's just cool to see all the different people from all different backgrounds coming together. I think it's really good to get fresh ideas.
Nice to meet you.
There are several issues that are very important to me.
I'm totally pumped for today. I'm ready for change. We're all ready for change. Let's do this.
Welcome to the Rights for All meeting. So today we're all here to learn about how we want to hold our elected officials accountable and make sure that they are defending and protecting civil liberties of everyone in this country.
The ACLU is investing in grassroots organizing because we saw there was so much energy out there. We had people constantly asking, what can I do? What can we do? We realized that to succeed, we had to have more than our awesome lawyers on the front lines. We had to have grassroots organizing to help defend and advance people's rights. It's going to take people in their own communities taking action together.
Who here has ever asked a presidential candidate a question? It's absolutely something that all of us can do. We're going to be practicing some direct candidate engagement, and there are 3 keys to doing that, and they are having your question ready, ask, listen, and respond, and make sure that someone is recording. Okay, great. Now let's go practice together. Does anybody have any questions for me? You in the black jacket.
Senator, will you continue to support the right of a woman to choose if and when she will have children?
There was a real diversity of people with experiences.
Yes, 100%.
There's a lot of issues going on around immigration, and so I like to try and talk about how disability affects these different areas that we talk about every day.
Really gave me some tools that I could utilize in reaching out to people and connecting with them.
I'm an ACLU Rights for All voter. As president, would you support lifting government bans on insurance coverage of abortions, such as the Hyde Amendment?
Yes. As president, what would you do to advance equality in the LGBTQIA community?
No matter how you identify or your orientation, you should not be subject to discrimination.
Would you commit to passing a modern Voting Rights Act and making Election Day a national holiday? Absolutely.
Now that we've practiced talking with the candidates, we're going to practice talking with the voters. Whether you're talking to folks outside on the street or at the doors, the basic principles are really the same.
There's just a few simple tips for making sure you have a great time canvassing. One is just be really friendly and have a big wave if you're able to, just right over your head. 2 is just have a really compelling ask. Do you have a minute to help end mass incarceration, or will you sign this petition to expand civil rights with the ACLU? And then lastly, is just have a positive attitude. It really makes a huge difference. So let's get out there and do it, right? Yeah.
So this is the Rights for All campaign. We're asking candidates in 2020 to make sure they support these fundamental and core rights, which is to end mass incarceration. I'm passionate about ending mass incarceration. I've seen the effects of it, and I've seen people who've been sentenced disproportionately for the crimes that they've committed. I was a little nervous because it's my first time canvassing. I'm with the ACLU. Once you start to get into the groove of it, it was easier to actually make the genuine connections. So it was a good experience.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your work. Civil Liberties.
I have spent a lot of the last few years being really outraged at what's going on, and I want to have a bit more of an active role, and this is an easy and great way to do that.
Thank you.
So whether you're organizing an event or talking to your neighbors, I think the most important is really to have the connection and to show that we care for what's happening here in our country.
Coming out here and getting involved and sharing and getting other people to talk about these important issues was really something that made me feel like I am contributing to solving the problem.
There's more of us that are together than those of us that are apart. We share common goals and interests that are really just about humanity and being a better country, because we know that we are.
It's pretty awesome. It's pretty awesome to see people in action like that. Before we close, I want to spend a bit more time hearing directly from some of the individuals we have with us today whose lives have been directly touched, whose families' lives have been directly touched by the issues that we're talking about today. These are the types of people we fight for and fight with each and every day. It puts the clearest point possible on why this campaign is so important. Jose Yvonne, you shared earlier a bit about you and your family's immigrant story. Might you talk a bit more about what it would mean to you and your family to have a president in the White House who was willing to walk through fire to create pathways to citizenship for undocumented immigrants? A president who was committed to ending inhumane detention practices in this country. What would that mean?
If there's real action behind those words in a president, then I think that it would feel like my family has liberation. It would feel like liberation and like hope. Like we actually have an ally in the White House who isn't trying to divide us or vilify us, that we don't have to start choosing between quote-unquote good immigrants or bad immigrants. It would feel like we can finally step out into the community that we've been a part of for so long.
Absolutely, thank you. Thank you. Rick, you talked about your experience in the criminal justice system, and you shared candidly that you spent 18 years behind bars. You're now out, and you're working on these issues day in and day out, pounding the pavement, pushing for criminal justice reform. What would it mean to you to have someone sitting in the Oval Office that was as focused on pushing criminal justice reform forward as you are, a true rights for all champion in the White House?
Well, I guess it would feel sort of surreal, because for us that are formerly incarcerated, and for those men and women that are still incarcerated, we feel less than, right? We know what these issues are, and honestly, it feels like people don't care. And so what it would mean is that we could be welcomed back to the community as a whole person, right? Now, I'm not half a person because I'm a felon. I'm still a human being, right? I'm a husband, I'm a son, I'm a father, and I'm a grandfather, just like many other folks, right? And so for that man or woman that takes office, there's a saying, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. What we're asking for, show us you care. And show that care by taking action, by supporting the Smart Justice Campaign and the many other initiatives across this country that affect folks just like me.
So what's incredibly special about this group of folks is, not just that they care about these issues, not just that they are deeply invested in these issues, but everybody up here is engaged in activism and action every day, every week, every month, the same types of activism we are asking, you to join us in. And there's a journey that you take there. You go from caring to wanting to actually be part of the change. And Jamie, you've sort of taken that journey in your life. You shared your story earlier, and it's a profoundly emotional story. But you've moved from that point to engaging, including with us, on the ballot measure campaign in West Virginia, on the work we did in relation to the Kavanaugh nomination. You've made it a part of your life to act on these issues, and not just act by yourself, but to act in groups, to act with others, to join arms with other people and fight to create the nation that we want. Can you talk a bit about that journey, getting to the place where you were?
Yeah, I've always been very vocal as an individual about being pro-choice and supporting reproductive rights. But this past October, during the Kavanaugh confirmations, it hit home. And I had one woman call me and ask me if I would take part in a sit-in at our Senator Joe Manchin's office and tell our stories, tell all of our personal stories. And we live streamed it. We showed up and we live streamed it. And because it was on a live stream, there were hundreds of other women, not just the 17 of us, that were also telling their stories. And we did this for 15 hours. And because of that, the ACLU rented a bus, and we took the bus and we went to Senator Manchin's office, and he agreed to meet with us. There were about 40 of us, and not just women, there were men and there were children. And they all told their personal stories, and he listened. He didn't make the right decision in the end, but he did listen. And I believe that if it was just me showing up, he wouldn't have given me the time. It was the collective. And because of that, I'm here. I have no idea how I'm here. It feels good. It feels good. And I believe it's because people do have power in groups. And we can do it. And you just have to say yes.
There's real strength in numbers. That's what this campaign is all about. Rick, you've taken that same type of journey, and you've taken the step to make working on criminal justice reform issues your full-time job. It's your occupation. You hit the clock. You were working on this issue 8 in the morning, 5 p.m. every day. Talk about how you decided to dedicate your everyday 9 to 5 to making progress on this.
Well, first of all, I'm going to start asking for 9 to 5 hours.
I like that.
Right? Because we all know this work is not 9 to 5, right? I'm sure my wife could attest it's morning, noon, night. And, what it's meant for me is, I mentioned earlier about being able to recruit and train folks that are coming home to lead in this work. And so I'm going to take a second. I'm going to talk about a young man who was incarcerated at the age of 17 and who served 20 plus years and was sentenced to life as a juvenile, right? And so the work that the ACLU did in relation to that is what actually garnered him his freedom. And I began to work with him before he came home in a different capacity prior to the ACLU. And when he came home, I brought him to the ACLU and I introduced him to folks, and he began to door knocks on Prop 3 to expand voting rights, right? So here's a guy did 20-some years, he's been home less than a week, and he's out volunteering and he's knocking doors, and I'm talking to folks on the phone and they're telling me they don't have time. They're busy, they're this. Well, here's a guy that has missed out on so much. But each morning he was so excited to go knock doors, to tell people how important voting is, because as a 40-plus-year-old man, he never voted, right? And for him, the win was when folks would say, Lamont, because you shared this story, because you shared how important this is, because you knocked on my door, I'm going to go vote yes for Prop 3, right? And we got Prop 3 passed, right? Another win. And so I feel like what we did as an organization is we reached back into the very community in which we represent, and we said we care, but then we followed it up with action, right? And we helped him to adjust, and we're still helping him and men and women just like him and young folks just like him. Because as I've said before, if you want to tell me you care, that's cool. You want to show me you care, then commit to an action. Then get involved. Because as we've all heard, there are so many things that we need help with in this country. So I just encourage everybody. If Lamont can find the time, I think we all can.
So I hope those stories of impact and activism have left you as energized as I am right now, because this, right now, is a big, big moment. 2 years from now, we can have a president in the White House that protects and advances rights for all. But it is important for us to understand that the battle to create that reality starts right now. As we say every day, these candidates, again, the many candidates, I don't actually know the number in total, are works in progress. They are figuring out every day who they will be. They are figuring out every day what issues they will prioritize. They are trying to figure out each and every day how to distinguish themselves from the other candidates. And what I'm telling you, what I'm telling everybody participating in this event tonight is that we can fill in the blanks. We can actually bring clarity to their lack of clarity. We can decide where they will stand on an immigrants' rights issue, where they will stand on a privacy and surveillance issue, what they will push for in the criminal justice reform space. That power is within us. It is within us to determine who occupies the Oval Office 2 years from now. So the ACLU, as an institution, we don't endorse or oppose particular candidates. We don't weigh in that way. But we are crystal clear on the policy positions that we think are the right ones. We are crystal clear that a core ingredient for occupying the office of the presidency is having a true, rock-solid commitment to protecting rights for all of us. And so we're going to fight with you to make that happen, and we can make that happen. If you engage right now in this campaign, if you go to a town hall and ask a question, we can make this happen. Every time you stand up, every time you raise your hand, every time you say, "My name is," I am an ACLU Rights for All voter. Will you commit to do every time you go through that process, we get closer and closer to having a president in office that will protect and advance rights for all. So to close, let's do this. We can make this happen. I look forward to seeing each and every one of you out on the campaign trail. Thank you very much.